Welcome back to another edition of the AI44 Leadership Series, Insights from the C-Suite. Today, we discuss the impact AI is having on business today and how leaders are, leading through this transformation. Over the next 20 or 30 minutes, we'll cover general challenges organizations are facing adopting AI. Our guest today specifically will talk about customer experience and marketing. Important things around how leaders are governing and guiding organizations through this transformation. And finally, we'll round up the discussions regarding the evolving role of the executive as it relates to AI as well. Today, we're joined by a good friend of mine, Uwe Stueckmann, former EVP, Chief Customer and Marketing Officer from Loblaw, and has recently moved from the corporate world to live in entrepreneurial land. Uwe, how are you? And thank you for doing this. And more importantly, how's this transition been going?
So nice to see you, Steve. It's been interesting, I have to say. Together with two of my good friends and business partners, started Innovate Marketing back in October. So it's been 6 months. And there are a couple, maybe an example, like a real life example of how the world is different. We went to the world's biggest retail show called NRF in New York, and tens of thousands of people walking the trade floor with all the innovation. And back in the day, I would have to turn my badge around and I would hide from people, so because I felt very much like I was the hunted. And this time around, I am in fact the hunter. So that's an interesting paradigm shift for sure. There's some things I really don't miss about my career's been over 30 years in big publicly traded retail companies. The things I don't miss is sort of 18 half-hour meetings in a day, back to back, back to back, that leave zero time for thinking, and you'd have to do your work at night. And I don't miss management board meetings. That is something I don't miss, and the industry that comes with that to prepare and get ready for these things that are such enormous time pressures for you. But I'd say maybe my most positive part about this new world that we're in is sort of the community of entrepreneurs, actually, and you're very very much a part of that. The generosity of people that have been doing this far longer than me, with their advice and their willingness to make connections for me, and that's been super gratifying, and people challenge your thinking and help you grow your business. That's been really cool.
Yeah, they always talk about how it's the backbone of the economy, which it is as
Yeah.
well. But it's great to see like yourself coming out of with all the experience of it, because I think navigating the corporate world like that alone,
Yeah.
from the experience you have and everything you just talked about, is incredibly helpful, not just for your business, but I think other entrepreneurs as well. So I
Yeah.
think that's one of the challenges of some of the companies I'm working with from an advisory perspective. Young founders, super excited, just out of universities, got the million ideas. They're going to go unicorn tomorrow. Like they're
Yeah.
super excited,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
then they start getting involved inside of these corporate webs, if you will, and being able to sort of navigate that becomes challenging. So anyway, congratulations on that. That's fantastic
Thank
news.
you.
All right, so let's get into this. We'll try to make this as casual as possible, but we will put you on the spot a little bit with some of these things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is more kind of the challenges that organizations are really facing right now, kind of more from a macro perspective. There was a great stat from a company called Section, which I pay a lot of attention to. They actually do this study every year on AI proficiency. And their latest one that just came out in, I'm going to say like March of this year. So like now, basically, 45% of businesses with paid AI tools or applications, uh, only 12% of the employees are using those AI applications on a day-to-day to affect operations. So of these organizations, that just seems to be like this huge widening gap of adoption. So why do you think this lag? And is this just sort of, yeah, this is just kind of par for the course? Like this is what it is, but what do you think the lag is in this adoption?
Yeah, so that's I think really interesting. You've got and we've observed um, most organizations start with what you can't do. Start with the safeguards. Start with here are the don't upload your data, don't use this tool, don't use that tool, only use these things, only use it for these things. And it creates sort of a bit of a environment of fear around this. Am I allowed to put this in here or not? Is it cool or not? You know, and am I going to get in trouble if I take I don't know, this employment contract that I'm going to send to somebody that I want to modify and throw it into ChatGPT, is that going to be a thing? So I feel like that's one of the big um, obstacles. It's coming from a mindset of protecting versus a mindset of growing and innovating and driving efficiency. Um, uh, we see that changing. We see a lot of people building their own AI tools internally. Certainly, the big guys are. They're implementing their own LLMs on top of their own data in a safe place to let people go free a little bit. The second part that I think is actually impacting this a bit is cost. These LLMs are not free. You're buying tokens, and if you don't use them for a purpose, you can run up some pretty big bills pretty quick. And that might be sort of opaque around understanding the business value you're driving from that. Um, what we think about all the time is you cannot actually understand what's happening unless you measure it. You need to have a very clear right on the outset of any kind of initiative or program or project, the right measurement plan in place, and clear objectives, be those customer experience objectives or profitability or sales objectives or AI adoption objectives. And you need to measure that along the way to understand if you're moving in the right direction or not. And that's one of the reasons we partner with you guys to bring your measurement instrument to the retail world, because I think having a baseline of how proficient is my team, how proficient are people in actually prompt engineering and things like that, and how is that evolving over time, I think is a core principle for us. If you can't measure it, don't do it.
Yeah, it's by the way, I'm gushing right now. So because you're speaking to exactly
Yeah, yeah,
our sort of reason for existing. So I couldn't agree more. And I think it's something even more important now than it even was in previous technologies. Not that
yeah,
social media didn't need to be measured and understood, but it was just a different thing, or even mobile adoption, or bring your
yeah,
own device to work, and all those kinds of
yeah, yeah,
sort of
yeah,
things
yeah,
that have happened over time as well. But you touched on something I think is really interesting. It's sort of like we're so focused inside of these organizations. And one of the interesting stats we're finding too is like when we go in and we run sort of our various different adoption assessments, we're like finding like, oh no, people's home use, like using it at home, it's like off the charts. Like they're like, oh
yeah,
yeah, I'm using it 3 or 4 times a day and
yeah,
every day. And but then I
yeah,
get into work, no, not so much. Really not sure what application. So it's like the complete opposite. Now that could be just clarity within the organization and leadership, but it's interesting if you start thinking about it from a customer lens.
yeah.
I'd love to know what your perspective is on that. Like, are customers finding value of organizations that are starting to roll out and implement these AI applications?
Yeah, that is exactly what we think about and work with our clients on every day. And so our domain is really retail and loyalty in the context of marketing. And if you think about retail in Canada, 80+% of commerce happens in a bricks and mortar store.
Mm.
A lot of what's being talked about of what's to come with AI is focused on the 10+% are happening in e-commerce. But the bulk of what's happening in the real world today is happening in physical retail stores. And if you think about how customers might experience AI in a physical retail environment, it's quite subtle. Most of the efforts in retail have been focused on the back office, on driving efficiency in all the functions in HR and legal and finance and all of those things, and starting to deploy AI solutions to drive better assortment and better inventory levels. So the experience a consumer would have is I'm walking into my local grocery store or hardware store or specialty pet food store, and I should experience better pricing because the entire system is more efficient, and some of that efficiency should be passed through the consumer through better pricing. That, of course, is a bit obscured with the inflationary pressure we have in the world right now, but that should, in the medium to long term, be one of the outcomes. A more efficient retailer should be able to give you a better price. I should experience fewer out of stocks. I think you should have the thing that I came here for more often than not. And it for the first time drives this capability for mass customization at the store level. So my local store should have the appropriate assortment for its trade area, and that's something that retailers have struggled with for a long, long time. The ability to get the assortment right for the local neighborhood, that's historically been solved through creating clusters of stores. These are stores near universities. These are stores in urban neighborhoods. These are rural stores, and we don't need to do that anymore. We can now drive customization down to the actual individual store footprint and make sure that you've got the right assortment at the right inventory level at a slightly better price than before. That should be what consumers are experiencing. You won't walk in and say, "Oh my gosh, they have this thing that they never had." You don't really notice that, but that's the impact on the customer. On the flip side, on e-commerce, and we can talk, there at length. That's where it's a similar principle, just that the unit of customization is not the store, but the consumer. And this promise of getting you the right information, the right offer, the right service at the right time, just for you, has been around since the 80s. Since like Tesco launched the club card, that was like the vision, true one-to-one marketing, true mass customization. It's never really happened. It's always been segmented, and I think we're at the cusp of that really becoming possible through AI-driven, LLM-powered one-to-one customization.
One of the things you touched on, or maybe you didn't go deeper on, or I'd like you maybe to go deeper on it, is, and I think it's a challenge, is as it relates to e-commerce, like the investments organizations have put into these large e-commerce engines and platforms, and yes, whether it's your AWS or Shopify or whatever, but now this shift towards hey, just buy inside of ChatGPT or inside of like to your point, does that reduce the friction that a consumer is feeling in terms of being able to actually get what they want? Creates a whole other world of optimization where you're moving from search engine optimization to now you're moving to AI optimization. How do you get cited at the top of these things where, and I know there's some different ad models, but I just see that as a massive challenge for organizations to try to navigate, like how do they show up inside of these, and then what happens over time to their e-commerce engines, right? So I'm curious if you have a perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean that is what I think one of the biggest challenges we have going forward for sure. And there's a number of aspects to this. So you mentioned earlier that consumers, so people that work in the offices of the companies that we help, are using their ChatGPTs or Claudes, Geminis every day. They're using it to plan birthday parties, or we're hosting an Easter dinner next week. It's 15 people. The task of organizing that has become so much easier. They're using it to plan their travel, all the things, like their healthcare, how to deal with their teenage children, like all the stuff, right? People are getting better and better and better at at leveraging the power of LLMs for their life. That is going to come into e-commerce, and I'll touch on that in a minute, where it's impacting life today for retailers is actually on discovery. Um, if you think about if you wanted to buy, I don't know, so my case study here would be my niece is turning 5. She likes everything pink, Barbies and unicorns. Um, that's all I know. And I don't want to buy her a Barbie or something pink. So that's sort of
Yeah.
the prompt that I put into Gemini, and it comes up with like the most amazing recommendations for me to buy. And where does it send me? Walmart and Amazon.
Yeah.
You look at what pet food I should buy for my new puppy, and give the LLM all the specs. Where does it send me? Walmart and Amazon. It doesn't matter unless you're really getting to specialty categories. It doesn't matter what you want to buy. It's like water flowing through a system, finding the path of least resistance. The answer on this is almost always Walmart and Amazon.
Mm.
And if you are, I mean, I was thinking about a specialty toy. We've got mastermind toys in our neck of the woods that are having a resurgence that I know have a pretty decent assortment. They're not on the list. You've got Scooter Girl over there in my neighborhood, which is in Roncy, independent store, would never make the list today. And so as people are using LLMs for their discovery, even the bricks and mortar business is dramatically influenced by that. In a pre-LLM world, I would use Google, and it might give me 20 links of things, and maybe the first would still be Amazon, the second would still be Walmart, but I'd say, oh, Mastermind Toys, let's click on that and see what they got. Or human behavior. You go to the Scooter Girl, I like those people. Let's see what they got. Gone. That traffic, discovery traffic's gone. So that I think is a really interesting and important thing for the middle powers in retail. The big guys, they will attract. They have the gravity to attract that traffic. The little guys are just going to be cut off by these LLMs, and they're not going to ever make the cut unless they change their strategy a bit. There's a few things you can do about discoverability, about having unique assortment, about having better product data, about not hiding your data behind a login wall, and making discovery a bit easier.
But if the general LLMs are really controlling that discoverability, as you put it,
Yeah,
it puts a lot of pressure on those organizations to do more brand awareness, which they may not have budgets to be able to do that. It's almost like the reverse is happening, where the idea of the long tail became where everybody could be a retailer, everybody could sell their
yeah,
product direct to consumers.
yeah,
And you didn't need to sell a lot of SKUs, you just need to sell enough to make some money and
yeah,
be a functioning entrepreneur. But and then the Shopify's provide you a platform that you can then do the transaction. But now with the LLMs, all of a sudden it contracts that, or at least for the time being. Like I
yeah,
do think
yeah,
there's I'm doing some work right now with a company that's actually specializing in AI optimization. So
yeah.
getting cited inside of these things. So I think we're early days of this, but definitely a challenge. And also too, like I'd love in another discussion. I don't think we got time today, but the role of brand awareness, especially when you talk about the physical stores, I think is going to be incredibly important moving forward. So,
I mean,
okay, let's
I would say
switch.
that unless you tell the LLM that you really love Scooter Girl, the brand awareness doesn't matter. LLMs don't have emotions. Brand attachments are emotional attachments. LLMs are very logical, far more logical than consumers, and so that is it's just a different game.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying though about brand awareness. Like unless you are seeing the physical stores
Yeah,
or
yeah,
actually, experiencing in some way. I'm just saying like the role, because there's all this discussion right now around the marketer's role of the future, as which, by the way, to your point about one-to-one marketing and personalized marketing, I mean, the idea of the role of the marketer has been under siege for the better part of like 30 years. You and I, we
yes,
sat on
yes,
boards
yes,
together and had these
yeah, yeah,
discussions
yeah,
around
yeah,
what's the role
yeah,
of the
yeah,
marketer, and it's
yeah.
just it's sort of this never. I think it's going to evolve as it always does, but I think there's a huge role in terms of really getting your product, service, or brand out there that much more. So,
Yeah.
okay, let's change gears. I wouldn't mind getting your perspective a little more around the governance side of things. So, and maybe this is tapping a little bit into your experience on the corporate side of things, but also too, just because you're working with so many different organizations now on your entrepreneurial world that you're working in. I'd be curious about like, like, and we talked about it a little bit offline around this idea of like everything is kind of in these silos, whether it be data, organization. So this constant sort of fragmentation, but I think it's bigger than that. I think there's fragmentation going on around governance. And then
Yeah.
you touched on something really important I think we should talk about is who owns this? Like who's actually responsible for AI and sort of organizations? I mean, like every organization is putting like an AI czar in charge of it, and usually is being tapped out of either the IT group or some group like that. I know there's been some groups that have had the head of HR that is now owning all tech. And I mean, there's different models out there, but who owns it ultimately? Love your perspective on this.
That is a really tricky one. I would say, as I think I mentioned earlier, the challenge I see is that organizations start with too much governance, um,
Mm,
are being too concerned about abuse of this data leak, all of the stuff. Now, these are, if you're a publicly traded business, don't put your sales plan into ChatGPT. Those are good guardrails. Um, there's two models that we're seeing. One is there is a single organization that is tasked with building the plan that reports back to the board, because much of that starts at the board of directors. I remember 2 years ago I was sitting in a board meeting and all of our directors had gone to director training. And it came back from director training the week before with here are the 12 questions you should ask management about AI. And we're going, oh, no. So now you spawn up this whole industry. Somebody on the leadership team table gets tasked with, you lead this, and you help, and then you build a task force, you bring people in, you create an apparatus, really to come back for the next board meeting to see here's our plan. And all of that is just, I mean, corporate governance, that's how it works, but it doesn't really drive innovation. So this single owner structure that somebody decides where you should go and what you shouldn't do, I think in this instance is probably not the right answer.
hmm,
I think there is a federated approach to this, and maybe a community of practice that comes together that shares learning. That says, if I'm the head of legal and I have as in my last gig at Parkland, 6,000 stores and 6,000 leases, um, I should find a solution that helps me manage that far more efficiently than having somebody draft a lease by hand, and massive productivity advances. And that shouldn't be caught up in some big bureaucratic machine to say, are you or aren't you allowed to do that? And shouldn't you do it? There should be some guardrails, and you should be free to go. That's true for legal, that's true for HR. That's true for finance and for marketing. Here's your guardrails, go. And then you create a community of practice where people compare notes. And yeah, you probably will need somebody to run that community of practice. In my opinion, it could be in a corporate strategy group. It could be, as a marketer, I always think it should be in the marketing group. But it could be in the digital. If there's a CDO, that's usually a good person for that to sit with. Um, I'd be cautious to put it in legal. I'd be cautious to put it in finance. I'd be cautious to put it in IT. because that's more about what you can't do and safeguarding versus exploring opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's actually these profiles out there of who makes the sort of ideal AI transformation leader inside of organizations. And if you look at kind of I think there's like uh, six sort of specific profiling attributes to them. Anyway, of the six, like three of them speak directly to a marketer's wheelhouse, right? Being able to communicate really well,
Yeah.
innovative, focused around what's possible, what's not. I think that communication thing is really important. I think that's one of the things where, at least we found, I'd be curious what your perspective is, but this is one of these things to be able to communicate it. And I love your idea about more of a federated model versus like there's a sort of a single group responsible and charged with this, because that could be one of the reasons why organizations are struggling with the
Yeah.
adoption overall. But so the federated model is interesting. I struggle with what federated model has worked in the past. I think there's that. To your point about these cross-functional committees that you and I have always been involved with.
And I think I'd say that like a good analog to that would be analytics, which is a long-standing struggle. You have centralize all analytics and have an analytics group that even builds out services internally to do the analytic things for you in finance and marketing and whatever. Or to have a federated model where each team has their own analytics people
Hmm.
that are part of a community of practice, that have common tools, common training. Now you have an analytics career path beyond. If you're in finance analytics, you can now maybe end up in marketing or vice versa. There's a career path for analytics people. So I feel like it's a similar thing where you've got domain experience that you need to have, and a specific subject matter expertise in analytics that kind of together in a community of practice that shares best practices, that shares ideas, that shares success stories, and creates career paths for people. I think that's a really interesting model.
Yeah, it's sort of you're evolving the matrix model is what you're
Yeah,
really talking about.
yeah,
I'm not talking
yeah,
about matrix the movie, by the way. I'm talking about
yeah,
matrix the corporate models. So really interesting. I hadn't actually kind of thought about. I've heard people talk about this in that structure, but I haven't heard somebody articulate it as well as you did. So I really like that. One thing you kind of bring up too is like this idea, and it kind of ties to sort of a kind of a two-part question. One is building the confidence inside of an organization. We talked earlier about like there's no doubt about it. People are using it, and I think to different degrees at home.
yeah,
I think it's becoming the go-to. Like people are now less and less going to, for example, their favorite search engine to sort of start. They're going to their favorite LLM and
yeah,
starting, right? So in whatever that discoverability that we talked about before. But then when you get inside of the corporation for various different reasons, whether they're the right applications or whatever, but I feel like there's a confidence or fear factor that still exists, and maybe that's partially because of hyped media, job loss, these kinds of things. But like to know what you found and what you're seeing related to that building confidence. And by the way, is it really just a fear factor? Is it just the fear of unknown? Yeah, I'd like to hear your perspective.
yeah. I mean, um, I think one of the ways to to work against that fear factor is to not be so heavy-handed with governance. I think that is a big, because I think most organizations started with when this started bubbling up, they said, "Oh no, we got to safeguard our data, we got to safeguard this, and you have to do those things, but that's not what your communication should lead with. This
Hmm.
needs to be about innovation, this needs to be about efficiency, and ultimately needs to be about better customer outcomes at the end versus like, yes, the things you can't do." The other thing that I think I've seen to be very, very successful is that you take a couple of actual use case projects. In my last job at Parkland, we started with supply chain optimization. There's lots of product moving to lots of stores. We thought about it as like almost like a neural network of
Mhm.
endpoints, and you're moving a ton of product, billions of liters of fuel across all of these nodes and products, and that's a mathematical problem that is very hard to do in Excel. It's hard to optimize in Excel, and it lends itself for maybe not an LLM. This is not it's not about interpreting language, although you might put an LLM interface on top of it. It's about old school predictive modeling, digital twins, forecasting, all of that stuff. And you built a plan to optimize something like that, and you put an actual objective in your budget. You're saying this is going to drive $100 million in earnings, and everybody signs up for that. The CFO, the owner of the supply chain, everybody says, okay, we're going to drive $100 million in EBIT through efficiency and margin gain. And if you deliver that, or when you deliver that, that's going to make everybody go, wow, I want that. That I want. Um, Versus this, we're going to give 100 people in the organization a co-pilot license, and we'll see what happens. That it's back to my earlier point. If you can't measure it, don't do it. Um, you need to have a specific objective. What are you trying to do? And measure against it. Have milestones. See if you're on the right track. And if you're not, you just punt and move on to the next thing.
I love that. And yeah, you're speaking to the converted on the, yeah, let's have 100 people have a co-pilot. Nothing creates more animosity inside an
Yeah,
organization is
exactly.
why do they get it and I
Yeah,
don't get it?
exactly.
What
Yeah, yeah,
makes
yeah, yeah,
them like,
yeah,
and then you
yeah,
try to justify it through, well,
yeah,
they're the innovation guys. And it's,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's the place that these things go to die. It is
yeah.
complex, so across organizations, I can't even imagine. I mean, the closest I ever got to sort of the big corporations when we sold our business and, I had 400 people in the product and tech group reporting into me across multiple different regions, domains, languages, all those kinds of things as well. So those challenges alone
Yeah.
were for me coming from like a 150 person, company that operated for 22 plus years, where I knew everybody's name and everybody's birthday, and that's not true. I
Yeah.
didn't know everybody's birthday, but good calendar function allows you to do
Right.
that. But the governance becomes incredibly complex across these organizations. So I think that matrix idea you had, or the federated model, I think is quite smart. I love what you said about the idea of like, and again, people are trying to do this with these pilot projects, but you're making it more very practical. It doesn't have to be. I tell this all the time to people too. You don't have to like stick a big sort of chat interface on top of this, or we don't have to go out and sometimes it's just really good machine learning. It's good
Yeah.
predictive modeling,
Yeah.
those kinds of things that are going to improve the business. I mean, I'm not sure big companies are maybe they are stuck. Maybe you'd know better, but I think mid-sized companies get stuck in this all the time. They're kind of hearing
100%.
these different viewpoints of it.
And they don't have, I've been very impressed back to sort of retail consumer interface. I've been very impressed with what Walmart's been doing in the US. They haven't really bought much of that to Canada. Their launch of Sparky as their LLM interface to Walmart.com brought massive conversion gains, which shows you that customers really like it because it's a different way of shopping on Walmart.com. You no longer navigate some menu that says which category, which department, here's my item and I add it to the basket, but it's more mission based. My kid's birthday is coming, so plan my kid's birthday and boom, here's my list. Their integration with Gemini was great. They're early mover on this. And interestingly, their integration with ChatGPT, early mover, and then they pivoted within a matter of months. This is Walmart. This is depends on the week. The largest company in the world, and they've been able to be really agile in how they think about this, how they leverage this for better customer outcomes. I actually think that's a good example. Now, Walmart has from a Canadian perspective limitless resources. If you're mid-market specialty retailer in Canada, what do you do? Like how do you don't have 100 people or 1,000 people you can put on a project to go and do this. That's why it's interesting to see what Shopify is doing in this, and I think that they're also, everybody is trying to find, everybody's trying to find their path forward. Nobody can predict how this is really going to work. You just got to do some fundamentals to get ready for it. But if you're not on one of those platforms, like Shopify, and you've got a homegrown e-commerce system on some legacy platform, you're going to be in trouble. That is going to be really, really, really tough. So for me, like this is the big one here is to say follow the lead of Amazon or watch what Amazon and Walmart are doing, watch what Shopify is doing, and and see how you can, compete in that environment. I think that's really really
It's interesting how you bring up Walmart, and you're not the only person. I've heard many people say, take a look at what Walmart's doing. So clearly, I need to pay a little more attention to this. So, but someone said something really smart to me. They're like, you know what? This is going to level the playing field and make Walmart incredibly, not just from a price perspective, because that's usually where they've always
yep.
sort of been incredibly competitive, but just from a transformational perspective or innovative perspective of in terms of how they're actually doing things. And by the way, I'm not saying they haven't been innovative. They've done lots of things over
Yeah,
the years, but it's to start to be able to play against the Amazons of the world where
yeah,
maybe Amazon has kind of sort of outcompeted them in the technology space, but this is
yeah.
sort of allowing them to level the playing field and do things really innovative. I will touch on one thing, and then I want to switch to kind of just sort of the evolution of leadership and just kind of stop there. And I've got these three questions I want to ask you at the end, where they're quick little hit questions. But the one thing I'd love just your thoughts on is familiarity important in this transition phase we're in right now? Meaning, we talked a lot about you're going on, and you're clicking and doing things like. The one thing I think that at least I have observed anyway is we have been trained for the last 20, 25, 30 years to go file, open, input stuff. Like that's how
Yeah,
we've been
yeah,
trained to
yeah,
do things. And now we're asking people, and maybe an app is a little different on a mobile device, but now we're asking someone to have almost a natural human to human conversation like we're having right now to solve a problem or
yeah,
find a gift for your niece or do these things where it's like where's the open button, where do I find the like search button and I can just search for products like me, like all of a sudden it's a very different way of we're interfacing with this. Do you think the familiarity of what we dealt with in the past has been something that's in our way, if you will?
Oh, for sure it is temporarily, I think. I mean, I'm sure you're seeing that when you look at sort of the measurement of prompt engineering. I think there's a large number of humans today of our generation that will use these LLMs as a replacement for Google. They'll write the same prompt that they would give Google and would have given Google in the past. And that obviously is not the right way forward. I do think, and I see that with the younger generation, both in the workplace and in my personal life, the idea of writing a prompt into Google and picking one of 40 links is like, what are you dinosaurs doing? Like it's so I think this is going to be flushed out very, very quickly. There was a time when people said, oh, online banking, you can't expect people to use an app to go bank. And there was a big learning curve, and everybody was up in arms about closing of branches and all the things that happened back then. Who isn't? My
Yeah.
88-year-old father is using an app to bank. Like it's going to be the way of the world for sure, because it actually makes consumers' lives better. It actually
Mhm.
improves the customer experience. It actually makes life easier. Um, and that's to me sort of the awesome sort of hopeful thing in all this. It does create a world that democratizes data. At another point, maybe we can talk about democratizing my data. Like, what right do I have as a consumer? Interestingly, I recently wanted to switch from ChatGPT to Claude,
Mhm.
and ChatGPT has gotten to know me pretty well. And the portability of my data over there is not super straightforward. If this whole personalization world in retail becomes a thing, and one day I decide, okay, I want to switch from Sobeys to Metro, should I not be able to take my data with? And because it's my data. And so there's some interesting stuff happening in Europe around legislation on this. We're lagging a bit behind on it, but I think that is part of the future of this is that your data, be that about financial services, and we do have some portability things happening there, retail, healthcare, personal interests, all of that stuff. Your data should be your data, and you should be able to take it with you. And I think that's going to really influence how commerce works, how consumers experience all of this.
It's I'm surprised there's not more. There's a few organizations out there that are trying to be almost aggregators or
Yeah,
be able to work across the general LLMs, but essentially you're interfacing with it. So then it does remember and also cross references the different
yeah.
parts because this is obviously a common problem. I'm surprised more organizations or startups haven't tried to tackle this issue because it is possible. They all have API calls. They're all different things you could do. So there probably is something more that I'm missing technically with it. But okay, let's just switch to really what does the leader have to do specifically to evolve in this new world? So or just to help the organization. You touched on a lot of different things around the federated model, being open to it. There's a number of things, but what is the specific leader? What is leadership? And it's probably not an ICD course you got to take to be able to figure this out. I'm curious what your thoughts are because I do think it's an evolving world of how you're going to lead this. You just talked about the next generation,
Yeah.
but I think it's an evolving world of like, managers are now going to be managing some kind of AI, whether it's agents or some kind of workforce that maybe, sort of autonomous versus humans or a combination thereof. So, what do leaders have to do to evolve?
I mean, I would start with actually maybe you do take a course or two as a leader to wrap your head around this, not to become an expert, but to become
Hmm.
smart enough to ask the right questions, which I think is always important as a leader, is not telling people what to do, but be smart enough to ask the right questions in the domain that you're talking about. That would be my first one. The second one is to actually realize that you are not going to be the best at this. You are not going to be the oracle of this. You need to surround yourself with people that are. And then maybe one of the big ones, and we've actually built an internal curriculum for this in my past life, is the power of critical thinking. Um, that's actually what the curriculum was called. And the in a world of semi-autonomous agents operating on the behalf of some manager, the power of critical thinking to look at the output to say, does that feel right? Does that seem right? Could that be right or could that be wrong? The ability to and I think in a world where we've got the machine giving us all the answers to all the things, I think it's very, very easy to lose the power of critical thinking, and kind of find the hallucinations that are inevitably going to be part of the solution set, and just be critical of the output, and or examine it critically. I think that's a really, really important one. And then don't be afraid. Like, don't be scared. Don't go like, oh my God, this is going to cost me my job. I feel like in particularly some of the middle layers of organizations, there's a lot of this, oh, they're going to automate me away, and you know, use it as an opportunity to get some new skills, and be part of this versus try and block it and stop it, because that doesn't.
So what do you think the time frame or the horizon looks like for this sort of evolution?
Um, I think in it, I think the challenge here is that what we've done today is point solutions. You've taken your, I don't know, your email marketing system and put a little AI in it. You're on an SAP ERP platform, and they're launching a bunch of AI stuff. you got Microsoft Office and you got Copilot and AI stuff there. And all of those things give you, 5, 10, 15% marginal improvement. What I think the big one is to look back and say, how do I re-engineer this entire flow, the entire maybe the end-to-end flow from buying a product to selling a product, but to really leverage AI. And it's a rethinking of the system. And that's going to take time because big companies have billions of dollars invested in their infrastructure. And to rethink that infrastructure is going to be really, really hard. But another opportunity though for the middle powers and the small guys to say, can I leapfrog this somehow? Can I rethink my business? Not in how do I AI optimize my call center, but how do I take the end-to-end process of what I do and really rethink that and build a new way to do that driven by AI. So I think the point solutions we're seeing happening now. I think you'll see improvement in the customer journey coming in the next months. So this is not far off, but a really big rethink of how the whole thing should work. I think that's a year or two away.
Hmm.
But it's moving. I mean, it's moving at a clip that is like breathtaking. It's awesome.
Yeah. I still think we're in this 20-year innovation cycle. In my thesis, that is, we're still humans, and the way we adopt things is
Yeah.
still interesting. So
Yes.
it is happening at a pace that I've never experienced in the past. Uwe, let's take this where we've got 3 questions and just kind of one response for each question. So what's one thing leaders should start doing today?
One thing, huh? I'd say go deep on your learning.
Hmm.
Go deep on and challenge your own thinking around possibility. I think it's really, really important to not be afraid of it and go deep and learn as step one.
Okay, what's one thing they should stop doing?
Don't be scared. Don't embrace it as something that ultimately makes your customer's life better, and work back from there because that's going to drive great business outcomes. But don't be scared. Don't try and fight it. Like I think that would be the biggest mistake.
All right, last question. And it's kind of your final thought, but where do you see this future headed?
Well, listen, if I knew that, no, I think I am super optimistic about what this will do for the world and what this will do for commerce. Um, we've only just scratched the surface. We're still using this as the surface to AI. I think that is going to be time bound. If you think about the advances in Siri and Alexa and other voice interfaces, I think there won't, like, maybe I'll have a chip in my head or something. I think it is going to be improving people's lives and improving outcomes for businesses, outcomes for medicine, outcomes for all kinds of things in a way that we can only just start to imagine. It is awesome. I think it's a brave new world, and I don't think we've had anything like this. Even the advent of the internet, which of course was a pretty big deal, and the launch of the mobile phone was a pretty big deal. I think this is an order of magnitude bigger in how it's going to reshape how we live our lives. And if we use those powers for good, I think there's a great future ahead of us.
Well said. Okay, we've come to the end of our time. And by the way, I always thought you did have a chip in your brain.
Yeah, no, well, no.
Just the number of meetings I've been in with you, and I'm always like, how did he think of that, or how did he come up with that? So that's why I always kind of assumed there was either a chip in there, but there's not. You're just an
There's
incredibly
not
smart
the
guy.
robotic
So,
nature that I sometimes have comes from my German heritage.
by the way, we're actually taking a trip to Germany this summer, so we're looking forward to. I may tap you for a few ideas,
Yeah,
but
please do. Please do. too. I go back a couple of times. So,
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Uwe, thank you very much for your time today. Great
thanks for having
discussion.
me.
Looking forward to further discussions in the future. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too. Take care.